One animal fell in the snow and an entire family lived because of it. Not for a day, not for a week, for an entire winter. And the way they used that single buffalo down to the last hidden scrap is far stranger and far more brilliant than most people would ever guess. We live in a world of waste. A person today might eat part of an animal and throw the rest away without a second thought. The bones, the organs, the fat, the hide, all of it discarded as garbage. So it's almost impossible for the modern mind to grasp what a single large animal actually contained for the people of the frontier and the plains. To them, a buffalo was not a meal. A buffalo was a warehouse, a hardware store, a pharmacy, a clothing factory. A single fallen animal held inside its body nearly everything a family needed to survive the deadliest months of the year. And the knowledge of how to unlock all of it was one of the most sophisticated survival systems humans ever developed. Start with the obvious, the meat. A grown buffalo could yield hundreds of pounds of it, far more than any family could eat before it spoiled. And there, the first genius appears. Because the frontier families and the native peoples of the plains had solved the problem of spoilage without refrigeration, without salt in many cases, using nothing but the environment itself. They cut the meat into thin strips and dried it. In the cold, dry air or over a low, smoky fire, the moisture left the meat. And without moisture, the bacteria that cause rot cannot grow. What remained was light, tough, and nearly imperishable. It could last for months. It could be carried for hundreds of miles. A winter's worth of protein shrunk down and preserved from a single animal. But drying was only the first step, and the next one is a small masterpiece of survival engineering. They took that dried meat, pounded it into a coarse powder, and mixed it with rendered fat and sometimes dried berries. The result was a dense, every rich food that could last not months but years. It resisted spoilage almost completely. It packed an enormous amount of calories into a small weight. And it contained a balance of fat and protein that could sustain a working body through brutal cold. This food was called Pemmican. And it was so effective that later explorers and Arctic expeditions carried it precisely because nothing they could manufacture worked better. A family with a good store of it could face a winter with something close to confidence. One buffalo, transformed by knowledge, became a wall against starvation. Now, go deeper into the animal, past the parts we still think of as food, into the parts a modern person throws away. Because this is where the real brilliance lives. The fat was treasure. In a frozen world, fat is not an indulgence. It is survival itself. The human body burns enormous amounts of energy simply staying warm in extreme cold, and fat is the most concentrated source of that energy that exists. The families rendered the buffalo's fat down and used it in the pemmican, ate it directly for warmth, and even burned it for light and heat when wood was scarce. Nothing about the fat was wasted, because in winter, fat was the difference between a body that could generate its own heat and a body that could not. The organs came next, and here the plains peoples understood something that Western science would take another century to confirm. They prized the liver, the kidneys, and other organs, often eating them fast and eating them raw. To an outsider, it looked crude. It was, in fact, precise nutrition. Organ meats are extraordinarily rich in vitamins and minerals, including vitamin C, the very nutrient whose absence causes scurvy, the disease that killed countless sailors and explorers who ate only preserved rations. The plains families living on buffalo almost never suffered from it, because the animal's organs provided exactly what their bodies needed. They not have the word vitamin. They did not need it. Generations of observation had taught them which parts of the animal kept a person healthy through a winter of no fresh plants, and they ate accordingly. Then the hide. A single buffalo hide was one of the most valuable objects a family could possess. Tanned and softened through a long, difficult process, it became a robe that could turn back the worst cold the plains could produce. Warmer than almost any fabric a person could weave. It became the cover of a shelter, stretched over poles to make a home that could withstand wind and snow. It became a moccasins, and clothing and blankets and bedding. The hide alone could mean the difference between a family that froze and a family that stayed warm. And the fur of the buffalo, dense and insulating, was so effective at trapping heat that people wrapped in it could sleep through nights that would have killed an unprotected body. And still, the animal was not finished giving. The bones become tools, scrapers for working other hides, awls for punching holes and stitching. The larger bones could be broken open for the marrow inside, a rich fatty food, and then boiled to extract even more nourishment from what remained. The horns became cups and containers and spoons. The sinew, the strong fibrous tissue along the spine and legs, was separated into threads and became the strongest cordage available, used to sew clothing and shelter and to string bows. Even the stomach could be used as a container, a vessel to carry water or to cook in by dropping heated stones inside to boil the contents. The bladder held liquids. The hooves could be boiled down into a glue, point to almost any part of the buffalo, and the people who depended on it had found a use for it. A naturalist and writer named George Bart Grinnell, who lived among the studied plains peoples in the late 1800s, documented this system in detail and marveled at its completeness. He described a people who wasted virtually nothing, who saw in a single animal not a carcass but a complete inventory of survival, and who possessed a body of practical knowledge so refined that it functioned as a technology in its own right. It was not written in books, it was carried in hands and memory, passed from one generation to the next, tested and corrected across countless winters until almost every possible use of the animal had been discovered and perfected. Consider what that really means. A family facing a plains winter with temperatures that could drop far below zero and storms that could bury the land for weeks did not need a supply chain, did not need a store or a factory or a shipment from somewhere else. They needed one animal and knowledge of how to use it completely. From that single buffalo came their food for months, their winter clothing, their shelter, their tools, their trade, their containers, their light, and their medicine. It was the truest sense, a whole economy contained in a single body, unlocked entirely by what the people knew. And here is the reflection that should stay with you. You have gained almost unimaginable abundance. A person today can eat food grown on the other side of the planet, wear clothing made by machines in factories they will never see, and live in a home built of materials they could never produce themselves. That abundance is a genuine gift, but it came at the cost of a certain kind of knowledge and a certain kind of relationship with the world. The Plains family knew exactly where everything had came from. They knew the animal that fed them and clothed them and sheltered them because they had used every part of it with their own hands. Nothing in their lives was abstract. Nothing was disposable. Everything was understood. We have traded that understanding for convenience, and mostly it has been a good trade. But something was lost in it. The Plains peoples looked at a single fallen animal and saw an entire winter of life, because they possessed the knowledge to see it. The knowledge did not require electricity or money or anyone else's cooperation. It required only a deep, hard-won understanding of the world and everything in it. One animal fell in the snow and an entire family lived through the winter because of it. Not through luck, not through magic, through a mastery so complete that a single buffalo became food, shelter, warmth, medicine, and tools, all at once. With almost nothing left behind, they did not have more than we have. In most ways, they had far less, but what they knew all the way to the bone, and that knowledge, in the end, was worth more than any warehouse.